In this video, I'm going to be looking at how you set up the Aerophone to give you the best possible lip response. So I'd like to just give you a little bit of advice on how we get the best lip response on the Aerophone. Now, since the version 2 software, this has got a lot better. And some of you that may have been out to the shops and tried the Aerophone initially perhaps didn't find it very responsive. And I have to agree with you, in the first version software, the lip response wasn't really working very well, but now things are much better. So much so that we can really get into adjusting the setup to really work with our own personal taste in terms of how we use our lips to produce both vibrato and how we do lip bend as well. And initially, what you can do now on the Aerophone pretty well is set the settings to auto. Now, before we go any further, we just want to make sure that you check that the mouthpiece is seated really well into the neck of the instrument. You don't want to have it slightly tilted in either direction. There is a little notch at the front of the mouthpiece. Make sure that's aligned properly. And if you look carefully from the side with some light behind it, you should just be able to see there's a little kind of lever that protrudes from the inside of the mouthpiece and touches onto the reed. If you're not seeing that lever there getting towards touching the reed, it's probably the mouthpiece that isn't aligned quite properly. So really make sure that's set up. Now, as I blow on this sound, in fact, before we do that, I'm going to suggest that you set the sound on the Aerophone to the pre-installed 25, the sine lead. And I choose this sound because it's a nice clear sound with no built-in vibrato, and it's a good one for testing out the lip response. So this is now set on auto, and you can hear that as I move my lips, the tension on my lips. So this is the vibrato. Vibrato is that slight undulation in the sound which gives the sound a lot of expression. And as I move my lips, a little similar to saying the word whoa, 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 whoa. This gives us a sort of vibrato sound, pretty similar to how you would do it on a real acoustic saxophone. And here's that sound. So you can hear there's a little bit of movement there. And when I stop using my vibrato with my lip, then the sound goes nice and straight and it's in tune. So this is set on auto. Now, we might want to do a little bit more than that with the settings, because the other thing we can do is now use the lip with a little bit more movement to create what we call a pitch bend or a lip slur. Now, although that's working reasonably well, sax players amongst you might be able to tell that I'm having to move my chin or my pressure quite a long way to get that dip down. And that might feel a little bit excessive if you're a saxophone player, or if you're just finding that difficult to control. So let's have a closer look in the menu settings now and see what we can do to refine that control. So here we are looking closely at the screen on the Aerophone, and I've already selected the sine lead sound. So now I can go ahead and press the menu button, and if you've just turned on the machine, you'll probably find that it's set on volume. Now, these initial settings are pretty self-explanatory. I might do another video of these settings just to show you what I use, but as I move through them, you'll be able to see how my settings are set. One important one worth just mentioning on the way, the breath setting here don't have this on too low. There's a lot of wind players, electronic wind players out there that seem to play these instruments and demonstrate these instruments only using the absolute maximum volume, the full breath response only. And it's a real shame because they're missing out on a huge amount of expressive quality by simply not using the breath properly to control the dynamic range. And if you set this control to one of the H settings, the higher settings, then what this means is you're going to have to blow a little bit harder to get the full volume out of the instrument. And I think that's the better way to go. Don't have this set on a low setting. Yes, it'll be easier to blow, but you won't get such good control out of the all-important breath sensor. Now, I'm going to move forward through these quite quickly. A lot of this is fairly self-explanatory. I have the default sound on this does set the bite control to PIT, pitch. That's the one we want to set it on if we want to use the lip response properly on the Aerophone. If you don't want that on, you can turn it off. If you don't want your lip to move the sound at all, I think that's a shame, but if you'd rather it just be a straight sound, turn that off. Don't be confused with VIB. The VIB setting here automatically does the vibrato for you. In some instances that's okay, but usually we'd prefer to control the vibrato ourselves. Also the vibrato sensitivity, that's a fairly personal thing. I prefer to have mine a little higher numbers on the vibrato down than the vibrato up. So usually I would bring this a little lower and I would do the vibrato down a little higher set. Now, if we go on to a lot of these settings here are now to do with the thumb lever. I'll cover these in a different video. Moving right forwards past the speaker setting to the breath adjust. Again, I tend to use mine on auto. What this is doing is, if you'd rather have to blow a little air through before the sound comes out, then you can increase this setting here. I think the way they have it set, factory setting, works very, very well. Now, what we're interested in here is this, the bite adjust and the bite sensitivity. Okay, so what do? The bite adjust sets how much pressure on the reed do you have to put on with your mouth to get the instrument to play at pitch. Okay, because if we set this up right, it'll feel just like our regular, say, saxophone or clarinet embouchure, and it'll mean that then when we loosen our bite, it will start to immediately affect the pitch or the lip bend. Now, remember earlier on in the video, I said that what was happening with particularly the bending notes, I was having to move my lip quite a long way before we got any sound out of it. Now, what we need to do then is we can adjust this setting to make that be feel more realistic, like an ordinary saxophone. So if I go on to this now, the first thing I'm going to do is change this setting here to 0, and a little tip here: if you want to speed up this process, you can press both these buttons at the same time, the right and left arrow. Now, here we are, set it at 0 to begin with. Now we have to do some trial and error. What we're going to do is we're going to try and blow a note on the Aerophone and see if any sound comes out with our regular bite on the mouthpiece. So here we go. Right, well, I'm actually finding that if I loosen my lip a little bit, the sound comes out. But with my regular embouchure, when I say regular embouchure, I mean my regular tension, the regular amount of bite on the reed, it's not coming out. Okay, that means what I want the aerophone to do is expect a greater bite as its kind of zero starting position. So what I'm going to do is increase the value now. And the mistake I made early on with the aerophone was to increase the value too much straight away. It's worth doing this no greater value than 5 at a time and then retry. Now what I'm getting this time is a quiet sound with my regular embouchure. And if I loosen off, it's still not quite right for me. I'm going to increase that value a little more. Let's try at 10. Okay, I think that's now a little bit too tight. So as I blow, when I get a sound, I'm squeezing a little bit more than I normally would do. So I'm just going to back off that, maybe just 1 or 2. Let's try 8. Now that seems to come out pretty instantly. As soon as I put the aerophone to my mouth and use my usual embouchure, the sound comes out. So that's the setting for me. 8 will not necessarily be the setting for you. We're all individuals with this. A lot of jazz players will play with a slightly looser embouchure. You might even want to go down into the minus values. So this is a very personal thing, but this is the way to try it out. Set it and just move those settings very small amount at a time and keep retrying until you feel that when you put the instrument in your mouth, the sound comes out as you're expecting it to. If you're too tight, the sound won't come out. If you're too loose, the sound won't come out. And so now what we can do is go ahead and look at the next setting, which is the bite sensitivity. Now again, move this to 0. Oh dear, sorry. I'm pressing both buttons to go fast. Let's put it on 0. Now what I'm going to do is test the pitch bend and the vibrato and see how that's working for me with the sensitivity on 0. Well, the vibrato's not bad, but to get a pitch bend, I still feel I'm having to open my mouth a long way to get some kind of pitch bend. So I'm going to try increasing that value. And I've found on this setting, you can be a little more generous. So let's go up to, say, 10. Right, okay. So now I don't have to make quite so much movement and you can hear the pitch bending down more. That's feeling pretty good. I think I'm going to increase it just a little bit more just to see if that feels more natural to me. Let's try on 20. If it's too much, we can always back off. Actually, I'm liking that. It's maybe just a little bit too much now, but I feel that I can just relax my embouchure a little bit and down goes the pitch pretty much where I want it to be. So that feels about right to me. Now, those settings are what we call global settings, so they're going to be the same for every sound that you use now. Just remember, if you take that mouthpiece off to clean the instrument, or if for some reason it gets knocked out of place, you might need to go through that process quickly again. When you get used to that, you can do it pretty quickly. It takes 2 or 3 minutes just to do the setup and try it out. The settings will be pretty close to what you've had before, but things could change a little bit. And by the way, if you're using the auto setup, remember that there's a certain amount of calibration that goes on the aerophone when you switch it on. So give it a chance to switch on without touching the mouthpiece and don't blow anything down the instrument. leave it to switch on and settle down first, and then start trying with your settings. So I found that by spending a little bit of time getting that set up just the way we want it on the Aerophone, it now becomes actually a really expressive instrument. We can never get to the full expression of a real acoustic instrument. Of course we can't, but the Aerophone is doing something else for us. It's giving us a greater range of sounds that we can use. We've got the saxophone, if we're saxophone players, to give it that full expressive range. The Aerophone can't sense what you're doing with your tongue position or oral cavity like a saxophone can. You can't play harmonics in the same way. So it's just down to getting that lip set up exactly where you want it to be. So it's worth spending time on that, because you'll really feel that you'll get a lot more expression out of the instrument. And again, if you've just been to try one in a shop and not had time to do that setup properly, might be worth going and have another little go, because I think it works pretty well. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you found it interesting.